every journey is unique. Obviously, life creates a lot of opportunities for all of us. Our ability to make these options available to us and then take the choices that we do really define the path that we take. So I mentioned about a few choices that I made in my life, whether it is about changing sectors, whether it is about the international experience, or taking the hard step of going back, coming back to India and joining a startup. So some of these I think were obviously my journey. If I kind of look at what has helped me, and I kind of, when I reflect back that okay, this has been my journey of these many years. What did I do, and what are those maybe two or three traits that helped me during this journey? I think the single biggest factor would be really about taking risks, right? And as I mentioned to you, there were a few examples in my life. I joined Wipro, as industrial trainee and post qualification. It was obviously the sector of the century, right? IT was just taking off at that time. But I decided to go back to a more traditional setup in FMCG, and I joined Britannia at that time. Now it was again maybe a not so popular move, but something that I was very clear that why I was making that. And what I really wanted to learn is the nuts and bolts of how do you build a hard business from grounds up. And over the years, that experience really helped. I started off in internal audit, right from learning about how cookies are manufactured, working late night shifts in a factory setup during those internal audits, to doing a hard salesman's job, doing those 40 beats in a remote town, in Kerala or in the Northeast. And I've done a lot of that experiential learning that came along, really shaped me as what I would call a business, finance person, or somebody who's very close to the business, right? So already we obviously have all the traditional accounting skills by our education and our past background and the learnings that we go through in the curriculum. But I think what really gets missed out is the on the ground business understanding training that we would need to really get through the experience that we need to get. So I think those were some of the risks that I took. The second one really is around really having a plan or working on a plan, right? And why would you do what you do? I firmly believe that if you don't know where you're going, maybe you will never get there. So very right from my early journey, I knew that I wanted to be in the top chair, a corporate CFO role. So while a business unit CFO or a divisional CFO or a country CFO or maybe a regional CFO are obviously roles that get you to the experiences that you need. But then being in the corporate CFO's chair really opens up a lot of new experiences, and that's something that I work towards, to build those experiences, have that plan that I would want to learn everything before I really get to that chair, right? At the same time, you can't learn enough, right? I mean, I remember before joining Swiggy, I hadn't interacted with a single investor in my life, right? Because as many of you who are working in different setups would know that typically these interactions or relationships are handled at the corporate level. So again, I took this chance. I think, okay, Swiggy is a startup. I'm sure it would need capital and would need investor interactions and all that that comes along with joining a startup. And I took that plunge. So I think it's kind of worked out. Just taking those chances and risk in life has helped me to probably get better and better at what I do. You asked the third thing, probably, and I will add maybe three things there, not just the third thing, right? It's all about execute, right? And strategy, idea, all of this is great. Ultimately, you need to get down to the trenches. You need to do it the hard way, and that's where you not only learn, because as you go up the ladder. I mean, typically, if you think of getting to the corporate ladder or ascending the corporate ladder, unless you have experienced and done a lot of that yourself, when you finally get there, and if you don't know how you have got there, it's probably going to be very difficult to be able to do that diverse set of role and the experience, or what's expected out of you for you to be able to perform in those expectations. So I think you will have to go through that hard journey and execute really well. There will be challenges, but then keep at it, keep growing, keep learning, and have fun along the way. You will definitely be able to meet your plan that you set out for yourself. You need to build those skills early on. I think taking those hard calls of getting those experiences, putting up your hand whenever you get an opportunity of not only continuing to do your functional role, but anytime there is a cross-functional role that comes up, or a cross-functional probably a project that comes up, you put up your hand and say, I'm ready to kind of take that experience, right? So I remember, while I mentioned about Britannia being a homegrown company and most operations were in India, I was part of the first international acquisition that Britannia did, right? So part of the diligence team, because I was part of that finance team who was looking closely at the brand side of things, and I raised my hand, said that this is something that I would like to learn, and I would like to contribute in this project. So getting access to my first acquisition or an M&A project through there, and obviously I've done many more since then. But that first experience really sets you up nicely. That how do you therefore go about evaluating that business, because you've already seen the business close up, right? So what are the drivers of growth? What are the key input-output relationships, right? What are the cost effect? What changes? What we call probably there's a L0 metric that you kind of operate at. But then what is the L3 input metric that changes the L0 metric, right? So the cost effect relationship understanding of all these business drivers is a very, very key element for you to be able to make part of the whole of those paths, and then be able to make a comprehensive judgment of the situation on hand, whether it is an acquisition, whether it's a new business initiative, whether it's organic growth, whether it is investment in marketing. So I think just getting to understand the L3 level details of what changes and what is the cost effect relationship between them only comes through your understanding of those business and those key business drivers. I think one of the things that I've realized, and that's very, very important, right? And it used to be probably a soft skill, but no longer is one, is really around communication, right? And you need to be an excellent communicator, so much so that if you are not one, you need to learn it, right? And you need to probably go to a school, you need to have, and it's not just your verbal communication, it's also your visual communication. Today's day and age, for example, as you mentioned, is the digital age, right? We are no longer writing long reports and verbose reports, but really about the visual representation of your data, right? The kind of big data that is available, how do you make sense out of that? That's probably best represented in visual formats versus trying to write a story, or even in Excel sheets or in a table format. So I think the importance of communication can't be undermined. When I say communication, it is not only about your business communication, but also top down and bottom up. When I say top down, right, it's how are you communicating with your teams on a regular basis? What are those agendas that you're setting, right? And what are the learning calendars you're setting for your teams? It has to, unless you kind of keep that as a top of your agenda, it will not happen. Similarly, communication to the various stakeholders, right? So whether it is your board members, whether it is the government officials, whether it is the other peer CXOs, and also communication within the community, right? So within your peer groups outside your company. So I think it's a very, very important skill set that we need to therefore build on. Within somewhere around communication is also networking, right? So you need to build a network, because unless you have a network, it's very difficult then to get access to difficult problems, and it's not something that you can overnight start building, right? So you need to build this over time, right? Make those connections, make those peer networks, be part of groups where you can cross learn, and therefore get solutions in a jiffy without having to go through the learning curve yourself. So I think that's probably one very, very important hard skill that we all need to learn. The second one, which again is a hard skill, is the stuff that I talked about, which is the non-financial skills, right? Now your ability to predict business outcomes, your ability to look at your business plans. Now how do you kind of just not only look at the financial data with the non-financial data, right? So for example, in our business, right, while we can talk about gross merchandise values and unit economy, etc., the biggest probably determination of our business plan is really the customer experience score, right? NPS, for example. Now, if as a CFO, if you don't understand that, what does NPS stand for, the net promoter score, what are your customers experience your product, what are the pitfalls, how do you avoid them, there is no way that the business model is going to become successful. So therefore you may have to start learning, and nobody taught us that customer experience is a very important metric when we were doing our curriculum or learning. But then in the real life, there is obviously competition out there. If you're not going to outcompete competition on customer experience, which again has to be measured, at every step of the way in the entire customer journey. So you'll have to understand those levers and be able to therefore make those plans and the business plans and the investments so as to make it really sustainable. So those are probably two of the hard skills that I would advocate. On the softer side, I think probably the first one I would call is really your ability to adapt to the environment, right? So as Charles Darwin himself said, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, but the only one that survive is the one which can adapt. During our times, probably Venkat, when we were growing up, the whole IT skills, your ability to implement ERPs, to make interfaces between two systems was probably one skill that helped us in our careers. But today, those are probably not the relevant skills anymore. Today, you have to look at digital skills like big data. You're talking of data sciences. You're talking of your ability to predict through using advanced machine learning systems. And these are not again in the realms of only the technology teams. Today they are part of the finance core teams. So today, even in our current jobs, we actually have finance engineering as an important part which works along with the finance streams. So I think your ability to adapt is going to be important. Now today, for example, digital skills are important. 10 years down the road, where many of our listeners on this call, they may require a certain different skill, because digital skills again may become a commoditized skill. Right, so I think our ability to therefore look at the environment, what's really coming up, and ability to adapt is going to be therefore that differentiator. And unless you are able to unlearn and relearn some of these skills, you may not be relevant anymore. And we have seen these examples play out. Right. The second soft skill probably that I would call out is really around your people management skills, right, and your leadership skills. I think as you go up your careers, while individual contribution probably gets you those immediate success or being known in the organization, I think very quickly you need to change gears, right? Because you cannot as they say, you can't run a symphony with an orchestra requires, for a symphony to play you need an orchestra, right? An individual player cannot really run the orchestra. So I think your ability to manage teams, look at people's motivations, and be able to lead them, specifically in tough times, right? And these experiential learning that you go through will help you in managing those situations, right? Because there will be crisis situations, there will be tough situations where the team will come up and look up to you. But then your ability to create, leaders out of them, your ability to not just be giving them solutions, but really lead the way and be real, provide mentorship so that you build leaders beneath you. So that's again a very, very important skill as you go about building your careers. So I think, when I started off with Swiggy, the first probably thing that we do is deliver on our own, right? So we actually register as a delivery partner, go through the training cycle, and do live orders, right? And when for us to be able to think of going and doing that may look very different, but then that's the experiential learning that you would like to do, right? So really it's about going to the trenches. It's our ability to therefore look at what is the delivery partner's experience, because when you're going to take decisions sitting in these sitting in your rooms and boardrooms, etc., you will need to be empathetic about the situations, and you need to know what do they go through on a daily basis, right? Similarly, in my past experience, right, for example, farming was one area. As I was telling to get into a cotton farm, and we did a greenfield operation, I had no absolute clue, right, what happens in a farming operation, right? Then you actually need to spend time with a lot of agronomists, understand the input output relationships, what changes, what are the risk factors there. So I think you have to immerse yourself. And the point that you made around understanding some of the air conditioning technology as a CFO, because that's your key business driver. Similarly, in a farming operation, what is the relationship of a nitrogen in the soil to rainfall, to irrigation or non-irrigation, to mechanization, to manual labor, etc. So I think a lot of factors that you will need to therefore learn, and you will not become an industry expert, but you need to get to the right amount of expertise for you to be able to make those business decisions and financial allocations. The textbook learning was on-the-job learning. I think there are enough and more researchers that say that probably 10% learning happens in the classroom or in theory, and 90% out there happens while on the job, while you're experiencing what's called experiential learning. So I think I kind of subscribe to that, right? So obviously you need the base and the foundation through the theoretical knowledge and some of the certification processes that you go through. But how do you kind of make them practically applicable to the situations that you are going to work? is going to be very, very important. I think what you therefore need is an enabling environment, right? And obviously the personal zeal to, as I said, if you have a plan, you need to keep, kind of doing I would say a pre-mortem and also a look back, right? Every maybe couple of years. When I say pre-mortem, okay, if this is my long-term plan and a goal, what am I going to do in the next 2 years? So that's like what I call the pre-mortem exercise. And then at the end of every 2 years or 3 years, you kind of do a look back analysis of what have you achieved and are you still on path of the trajectory that you had set out for. I think there could be changes that we may have to make in our career midway. There could be new ambitions that may come up. Our motivations may change. But then, as I said, you need to keep recalibrating your new goals if there are any, right? So as long if you're focused, if you think this is the thing that you want to go after, then you'll continue to make that progress and keep looking back at it. So I think that's really, really important. A lot of when I talked about technical knowledge, right? Say for example, today's young finance professionals learn to write queries and SQLs, etc., which is probably now even in the academics, right? And we didn't learn. I know I don't know about you, but I don't know still how to write a query and learn that. So again, the relevance of whether as a CFO you need to write learn SQL may not be there, because obviously at this level you're not expected to do a lot of on the ground work or do it hands on. But I think your ability to do what with that query, your ability to take insights, and again the actionable insights, right? It's just not about data and then converting into insights. What do you do with those insights? What is that action that you need to take in this week and this quarter and this year for you to be able to make considerable progress in the business goal that you're set out for, right? So that whole strategic thinking combined with a technical understanding of how that data or insights will be gathered and then converted into business actionable goals. I think that's really the journey that you have to be a master of versus just the technical knowledge, right? At the same time, for example, if there are new accounting standards, you definitely need to be updated. You may not be have an expert level understanding, but I think a general understanding of how it impacts your business, your P&L, that's very, very important. And obviously then you will get the right people to work along with you who may have that expertise level. But I don't think you also need to choose what you're really good at, right? And so accentuate your strengths. At the same time, areas which are of your weakness, have general understanding of it, right? So you cannot say that I didn't like tax when I grew up, and today you need to handle whether it's GST or income tax, you need to handle them. So you still need to have a general understanding of how these things work. At the same time, you are not expected to have expertise, in every aspect of the role itself. So identify your strengths and accentuate on them. So I think if you look at the larger organizational context, I think you definitely want to be in a company that has a larger vision, and is thinking big, right? It's there out there to play, playing to win versus just say playing to sustain. Right? And because playing to sustain is only going to give you a certain rate of growth, and therefore if the company or the organization is going to grow only at a certain at a slower pace of growth, your overall number of opportunities that's going to be available in that company with the leadership roles that are going to be available in the company are going to be increasingly lesser and lesser, right? So one thing, if you are kind of early stage in the company, just look out for that sign that how large is the vision of the company, how well are they going about executing on that vision. Are they playing to win a market? Are they going to create new categories? I think within that, a subset will be obviously the innovation index within that company, because if they are leaders in a category and they're not thinking about where does year 3 growth come from, then that's a warning signal, right? Because then you're not really investing sufficiently in the future growth prospects. So that's really the organization context. I think the enabling environment that I talked to you about is really the immediate, say your bosses, the peer network, the HR policies, for example, like do they encourage you to, take cross-functional responsibilities or roles, have those experiences. If you want to do a 2-year business role and come back to a finance role, I think those are really looked, really well in today's day and age. I mean, gone are the days where you had a classical career, right? That you go on to, start with X role and go to a regional finance, and then, the taxation, treasury, corporate finance, and then you could potentially become a CFO. I think what today's day and age you require is a lot of those cross-functional understanding. So if you want to do a role outside your core function and the organization enables it, that's great again, because that can fast track your own learning journey and career and growth.